Hey everybody, Brent, Revive Auto Detailing in Greenland, New Hampshire. Here to talk today a little bit about buying a new or used car and when's the right time. So typically I don't think a whole lot about this, but there's so much turmoil in the marketplace, in the automotive marketplace right now, that it does make sense to do some homework about when should you buy and when shouldn't you buy, and also what vehicles are the most attractive to buy. So let's get into some of the turmoil that we're seeing in the marketplace right now. As we all know, the electric car market has been evolving very quickly over the last 5 or so years for lots of reasons. There's been some marketplace demand. The government's got involved in pushing manufacturers that way. So that's creating a lot of kind of turmoil. You also have some potential for incentives going away, tariffs coming in, and changing interest rates, all which are having an impact on the marketplace. And then you've got some manufacturers that have made some significant missteps. Most notably would be Stellantis, which is the company that owns Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, as well as some other brands. They are really struggling right now. All of those things are having a significant impact on the number of vehicles that have been manufactured for the marketplace and the excess inventory that we're seeing within brands and more specifically within certain models. And there is one measure in the car industry that is used to measure that. It's called the market day supply. And if we look at the market day supply for products, you can look nationally at the data, you can look by brand, but you can also bring it down to specific models within a specific geography. And this is really what, when there's so much turmoil going on with oversupply of different products, you can dig deep into knowing which ones are there in excess inventory and which ones do the manufacturers need to move. So market day supply specifically is the number of days needed to sell all vehicles in inventory based on the previous month's daily selling rate. So for example, let's say, we'll use some easy numbers. Let's say Mercedes-Benz nationally has 100 vehicles in their supply chain on dealership lots or anything that's in transit. And last month they sold 100, you're going to have 30 days supply. So again, very simple numbers. We know that Mercedes has more than 100 vehicles. But that's how it's looked at. And historically, you're going to see right around 80 days supply, give or take, is what the marketplace usually has. Even pre-pandemic, that was the common number that you would see. Right now, there's 75 days, or at least at the end of December, 75 days of supply, which sounds a little lower than what you would typically see. But as you dig into different brands, you're going to see brands like Lexus and Toyota with less than 30 days supply. That means there's a real tight supply of those brands. Those manufacturers probably aren't super incented. But when you look at the other end of the spectrum, you've got brands like Dodge with 122 days supply of all the products across the country. You may see Dodge looking to, and you do already start to see some incentives coming back into the marketplace for Dodge, not so much for Lexus and Toyota. But let's dig into a little more information kind of geographically. So looking at a high level across the country, no surprise, Dodge Charger, that specific model, has 1,755 market days of supply. They're going to have to do something to move through those. But that's looking at the US. So if you're thinking about buying a car in New England, that may not be the most valuable information to look at. If we come and look at just New Hampshire at the slowest selling cars. Now, the reports that I have access to don't let me get into a direct market area, which would be kind of a Boston metro. It breaks it down differently to that. So I can look at all of New Hampshire, but I can look at Boston itself. So we'll look at both of those. In all of New Hampshire, the slowest moving vehicles, Land Rover has 8 of the top 10 slowest moving models, not the manufacturer, but individual models. Defender specifically is the slowest moving model. But again, top 10, 8 of them go to Land Rover. If we look at Boston, a market that many of us are buying vehicles from, it's a little more diverse, but the slowest moving vehicles, Jeep, which is again owned by Stellantis, has 4 of the slowest moving vehicles. BMW has 3 of the slowest in the top 10. So those 2 brands, you may find the manufacturers looking for a way to move that product through the marketplace. Conversely, we should look at the fastest moving. If we're thinking about buying a new vehicle, which ones are moving quickly? We're not necessarily going to see incentives there. Lexus, of the top 10 fastest moving models across the country, Lexus and Toyota have 8 of the 10 spots. Like I mentioned earlier, very low supply, likely to not have strong motivation to incent more sales when their inventory is low like that. Within New Hampshire specifically, the fastest moving, Lexus by itself holds 9 of the 10 top spots for models. And within the Boston market, Toyota has 4 of the top models for the fastest moving, and BMW has 3. And when you look at that, you look at what happens when there's that inventory glut of some brands in the marketplace, or if there's a limited supply, what are the manufacturers likely to do? So back in 2023, when there was not a ton of inventory, it was just coming back into getting all the inventory in the marketplace. The average price of a new car was $48,000. Manufacturers' incentives or overall incentives were 2.1%, which is very low. There wasn't a lot of movement from the manufacturer to move products through because they were seeing good sales rates. Conversely, if you look at today, we're seeing the average price of a car has gone up to $49,000, but the incentives are up around 8%. So in less than a year, we've seen the incentives go from, or about a year, we've seen the incentives going from 2% to 8%. But if you look back pre-pandemic, you'll see from 2016 to 2019, when the pandemic started, manufacturers were incenting at about 10%. So even though we're at 8% right now, I expect we're going to see incentives continue to climb. So as you're thinking about buying a new car, it may make sense to wait, although 8% incentive isn't bad. But again, you want to look at the specific vehicles that are incentive, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Looking at the used car market, we know that there was a limited supply during the pandemic years. So 2020, 2021, 2022, even a little bit into 23, roughly 2 million fewer cars were sold in each of those years, or about 12% annually, which means there's fewer used cars coming back into the marketplace. So we're going to see fewer used cars. You could assume maybe by 12%. With incentives being way down during that period, 2020 to 2023, buyers paid full price for those. So not only are there fewer cars in the marketplace that are likely to come back in as used cars for people looking for late model used cars, you're also going to see many of the people are upside down on their loans for these vehicles, and they're likely to hang on to the cars instead of trading them in, some of them, depending on how far upside down they are. Those combined with new car prices coming down are going to put some downward pressure on the price of used cars. So there's likely to be fewer cars coming into the marketplace, which you would expect would drive up the cost. The downward pressure from new cars that is going to be put on used cars is likely to overall have a net decrease on the value of used cars. And again, we'll look at some data specifically that shows that. So within the used marketplace, you'll be able to see that over the last 3 years, from 2020 to 2023, the supply has continued to grow each year for each of those. So the supply of used vehicle has gone up considerably. And then the price of new vehicles has come down from about $29,000 to $25,000. So although there's fewer cars coming in, we are seeing a high supply and a low cost compared to the previous 3 years. So as I mentioned earlier, I did some local research on a website that I like called Car Gurus for used vehicles. I took a look at a 2020 through 20. So I narrowed the search down to 2020 to 2025. And I looked at a Lexus ES, and we saw earlier that Lexus has very little inventory, at least with new cars. We can't see with used cars quite as easily, compared to a Mercedes C300. I narrowed it down to, like I said, the years 20 to 2025, less than 50,000 miles, within 50 miles of where I am. And then I took a look at days on market, and I looked at more than 60 days on market. So which brands are seeing a lot of cars sitting on dealership lots within 50 miles of me? Lexus ES showed 5 vehicles available that are over 60 days. As a matter of fact, if you looked at all days, regardless of how long it's been on the market, they only had 6 vehicles available. So if you're looking for a used luxury sedan, you're going to have a hard time finding or negotiating different prices other than what's listed for Lexus. Conversely, Mercedes-Benz over 60 days on the market, there was 179 C300s available. And if you took away the days on market and you looked at all of them, there's 282. So you've got to figure the Mercedes manufacturer and or dealers are going to be incented to move through these products and are much more likely to be negotiating pricing. So in general, there's a lot of opportunity to negotiate good prices on new and used cars simply by knowing which models in your specific geography are going to have a lot of inventory available. Something like we looked at with used cars, the Mercedes C300, or with new cars, pretty much anything Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram, you're going to see a lot of inventory in the marketplace. If you're looking for anything within those brands, expect to see some heavy incentives coming from the manufacturer as well as dealerships willing to negotiate on prices. Keep in mind, older used cars, there's going to be fewer of them coming into the marketplace. So while there's some strong excess inventory right now, that's not likely to last very long. And then also keep in mind your trade-in value. So we didn't talk about all that, but as the price of new cars is coming down and the incentives that they're putting against them is going up, the value of your trade-in is going to see a decline too. So keep that in mind. You might consider just hanging on to a car as an extra vehicle because the trade-in value may not be very strong for you. If there's anything we can do to help with your car buying purchases, give us a shout here at Revive Auto Detailing.